you were obviously in such a unique position to see common challenges across what I'll call your client base and the financial institutions that you work with. At a high level, can you tell us a little bit about what you're looking out for currently? And can you describe some of those common challenges that you are seeing right now and how are organizations addressing these common challenges?
Yeah, I mean, the key thing we're monitoring right now is just this new normal of banks having to support remote workforces. Dan, it was fascinating. When I came on board the Federal Reserve, I was asked to help co-lead the monitoring, we call our large and foreign banking organizations, some of the 39 largest banks in the United States. And I did that in partnership with a good colleague and friend of mine, Tom Doheny, who leads the cyber program with the New York Fed. It was interesting. Before the pandemic started, we were actually doing one of my key activities, which is I help plan and lead the horizontal exams that we do every year with these banks, where we go in and we check to see how are they doing, how well are they managing risk, are they identifying the types of, say, current as well as emerging threats and threat actors that are certainly pertinent to their organizations. And then, of course, March of last year hit, and we saw this dramatic pivot in terms of banks' focus to continue operations in the beginning of the pandemic. And so, of course, we've been closely monitoring the banks to probably an unprecedented degree, because obviously we want to ensure that banks were going to be successful in continuing to provide services without disruption. And I think in hindsight now, you can see that they were very successful, I think, in doing that. But it was fascinating to watch in terms of things that banks needed to do to address this new normal, in terms of people not being able to go into the office, people essentially not being able to go in and work together collaboratively. And I think, Dan, that's really critical for security operations teams because it's a team sport, and when you're doing cybersecurity, particularly in the operations portion of it. So much of the past year, Tom and I have been monitoring how the banks have been doing, how they've been able to successfully pivot to deal with all these new changes in terms of supporting remote access, as well as an increased dependency by banks' customers on internet services. We certainly saw this trend in terms of people using, their mobile devices more frequently, using online banking websites more frequently, but it really went to the next level when the pandemic started. So that's really been my focus, certainly over the past year. We continue to monitor our largest banks to ensure they're continuing to be successful in addressing just ever-changing, ever-evolving cyber risk and cyber attacks. Of course, to be able to provide, to a certain extent, a guidance and especially what we call range of practice information, to let banks know how they're doing, especially compared to their peers, in terms of having effective cyber controls in place.
Yeah, that's so important, Matt. And it reminds me of the bird flu pandemic, scare a little over a decade ago, right? Where the avian flu and some of those things really sparked some of those fears where, none of those really materialized as much as a COVID did or, hit us as hard as COVID did. But I think some of those institutions had those plans, right? Which was great.
Yeah, certainly among the banks that I was working with, I think they learned a lot from that avian flu and made appropriate changes to their disaster recovery plans, and especially with regards to the remote access capabilities
Yep.
to support, essentially your entire workforce to be able to get in and have secure remote access without any kind of, say, remote access capacity issues.
Yeah, and I loved what you said earlier about cybersecurity being a team sport, right? And I echo that sentiment all the time. And it's a team sport within your own cybersecurity group, but also with the other entities that you partner with inside these financial institutions as well, right? Specifically on the operational side and on the technical side. And something like COVID-19 disrupting how those teams communicate, how they operate, how they have their regular stand-ups. I mean, I could see that being a huge challenge, but it's glad to hear that, you're out there providing people with the information and showing other institutions that sort of range of outcomes and what right looks like. So that's a much needed service in the banking community. So thank you.